Welcome back, book clubbers. We're really excited to have you back with us for another book club episode. I'm Brittany.
And I'm Hallie.
And we're bringing you a little bit different kind of book today. It's a little bit more of a psychological thriller rather than your straight crime novel. If you like the show, make sure you're subscribed on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, and follow us on Instagram. You can like our Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Make sure to go to our website, theabysspod.com, for show notes and sources and pictures from the cases that we talk about. We'll have links for every book club episode so you can go and purchase the books on Audible or on Amazon. Also, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube if you like to consume your true crime content that way. We have a really good community of people on there, and we'd love to know your thoughts on different episodes and things, so that's a really good way to do it. But without further ado, the book we will be covering today is The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. And the synopsis is, it isn't paranoia if it's really happening. Anna Fox lives alone, a recluse in her New York City home, unable to venture outside. She spends her day drinking wine, maybe too much, watching old movies, recalling happier times, and spying on her neighbors. When the Russells move into the house across the way, a father, a mother, their teenage son. The perfect family. But when Anna, gazing out her window one night, sees something she shouldn't, her world begins to crumble, and its shocking secrets are laid bare. What is real? What is imagined? Who's in danger? Who is in control? In this diabolically gripping thriller, no one and nothing is what it seems.
So to kick it off, we're going to dive into a little bit of background about the author, A.J. Finn.
So buckle up for this one.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a whirlwind just talking about the author here. His real name is David Mallory. He's 41 years old, and he goes by A.J. Finn for his novels. He went to school at Duke University for English, which is super cool, close to home for me. And he lived in Charlotte, North Carolina with his family for a little while. He came out that he had survived cancer and that his mother had also had cancer, but she ended up dying. He had a brain tumor at one point in his life, and his brother committed suicide. It was later revealed that none of this was honest. He literally lied about everything. So awful to lie about cancers, brain tumors, and suicide, but Daniel Mallory did it. He was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder, and he says that this is why he lied so much. Most people really just believe he did it for success and fame. I believe he did it for a sympathy card, and a psychiatrist said that his diagnosis doesn't make sense with the lies he was saying, and it should not be used as a crutch to explain why he's been pathologically lying. And just to put some icing on that cake for you, Dan Mallory also was accused of stealing from the 1995 film Copycat for his book, The Woman in the Window. So he got his whole story from an old movie that's called Copycat. I just can't. It's so
little
funny.
bit of irony there for you. So now we'll jump into our thoughts on the book, and just remember while we're kind of going through this stuff that he didn't really come up with any of it, so we're not really giving props to the author as much as whoever came up with the storyline.
Just talking about the book itself, you know.
Obviously, the most glaring issue with the protagonist is agoraphobia, and it was really a cool element to the story. Obviously, similar stories have been told. We have Rear Window. We have whatever that movie with Shia LaBeouf was.
Transformers. I don't know.
Where he was under house arrest or whatever. So there's always that element that keeps someone inside, doesn't allow them to leave to get help or function as a free or neurotypical person. So that was an interesting element. It made her seem very vulnerable in the beginning, and I think as far as the writing goes, it was written well. I think since she was a psychologist, she kind of could explain the scientific side of it a little bit, but then you also saw that she was very human. It was heavily affecting her, and I think it was well written, the panic attacks and things like that.
Also, I can relate to her in the do as I say, not as I do kind of thing, because she would preach to other people but then wouldn't do the advice herself. which was very relatable as a character.
It kind of went in the beginning as just an annoyance for her and something that she kind of dealt with, to being a life or death situation by the end. So that escalation was also interesting to follow, and to see how different situations sort of developed with that.
Another aspect of the book was gaslighting. They really made her believe that she was losing her mind. And then at some point in the book, they even made me think I was losing my mind. Like I was her, and that I had completely imagined something that didn't happen. And I'm pretty good at predicting the outcome of books, and I could predict that someone was going to break into her house and try and kill her. I did have that thought. But it also had me second guessing that maybe it was all just like psychological, and maybe this is just like a psychological thriller that doesn't really, you know, have a killer or something. It's just her messing with her own head. It had me second guessing myself a lot, but I knew something was still off when you tried to connect the dots.
Yeah, when it was revealed by the police that it made sense that she was making everything up, and she started believing that herself, I got kind of disappointed, because I really don't like books where it's like, it was all a dream, or like something like that, or, you know, nothing was actually real and nothing was actually happening. But then I looked, and of course I had it on audiobook, and I saw that there were 3 hours left of the book, and I was like, something has to go down.
Yeah.
The book was written like you were really in her head. It was kind of short sentences, and her thoughts would go here and there. So that was kind of relatable and kind of funny at times. And I felt like that's kind of how it would be if someone was like listening to my thoughts. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, even reading some of her stuff made me feel anxious when she was anxious, or made me feel crazy when she was crazy. I could feel like my heart rate speeding. I was like, oh no, how dare they tell you that you didn't see that, you know? Definitely when the police weren't listening, I was like, yeah, come on, Detective Little. Dr. Fox and I saw what we saw. Like, we did. I also really liked that they had shorter chapters, because when I go to bed at night, I like to read sometimes. So it's good to have solid stopping places at the start of a new chapter. So the format was very good for me.
There were definitely a lot of twists and turns in this book, and I think we both were pretty surprised at the revelation that Ed and Livy were dead. I definitely didn't see that coming, even up until when she was describing the accident and like laying there with them and all of that stuff. I just like, it didn't even enter my head that they would have been dead.
Yeah, I was like, oh, they're gonna live, because obviously they're talking to her, so like they're gonna live through this, it's fine. And when that happened, it made me question even more. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe we are insane. Me and Dr. Fox are losing it.
I think the ending was still a little bit predictable, because I think that's just the nature of that kind of storyline, is that it's been told a lot. And
I mean, specifically once.
So I think that it wasn't really like a huge surprise how it ended. And the parts where little things would be off or different, it really creeped me out. I know when her phone password or whatever had changed, I was like, ooh, somebody's there.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of the cases, or I guess you wouldn't even call them cases, but if you guys, this is not sponsored at all, but Let's Not Meet podcast has a bunch of stories that they read from Reddit where people talk about little things being off in their home, and then they find out that someone was actually living in their attic the whole time or something like that. So when she was seeing off things, I was like, that's not normal, something's wrong.
And I think when the cat was injured, that kind of pulled everything together, when you were like, ah, yes. Like,
and the cat was all of a sudden scared of the boy.
Yeah, I think that's when I started yelling.
Now we're going to get to probably our favorite part of these episodes, is talking about how this book relates to true crime. Our first connection is going to be through nosy neighbors who witnessed a crime or helped break a case wide open. The case we're going to talk about is with Heather Teague. On August 25th, 1995, she was sunbathing in Henderson County, Kentucky, and a man was looking through his telescope at the beach, and he was across the Ohio River. He spotted Heather Teague, and I don't know if he was just looking around or if he rested on her for a bit. Don't really know. But he did see a man come out of the woods, grab Heather by the hair at gunpoint, and drag her back into it off of Newburgh Beach. The man was described as being about 6 feet tall, 210 to 230 pounds, so a pretty hefty guy. And he had brown hair and a full beard. He was also wearing a wig and a mosquito net, most likely to obscure his identity. Another witness came forward and recalled seeing a red and white Ford Bronco beside of Heather's car at the time of her disappearance. So they had a few tips to go off of, but the question is, was that going to be enough? Police searched the beach and they found part of Heather's bathing suit, but they really had no other leads than those 3. Later, at a routine traffic stop, they pulled over a man in a red and white Ford Bronco named Marvin Ray Dill. We'll call him Marty. He also matched the description of the abductor. The police found a hair that was similar to Heather's, 2 guns, 2 knives, duct tape, rubber gloves, and rope, as well as bloodstains in the tailgate of his car. If that doesn't have murder written all over it, what does? The investigators received tips about Marty, and they went by his house to question him. Marty told his wife to leave the property because of the police, and then Marty shot himself while he was alone and died before the police entered the home. Prosecutors collected all of this evidence and brought it to the grand jury, but Marty's wife refused to make any statements. Police looked into another suspect named Christopher Below. He pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter of a girl who died in 1991. He confessed to shooting her, but her body was never found. If you want to look up more about her case, her name was Catherine Fetzer, and we'll have it on our website, theabysspod.com. He was also considered a suspect in a few other cases as well, so he might have even been a serial killer. Heather matches the women that he was known to target. And he also shared acquaintances with Marty and Heather, which is really interesting. So the 3 of them had acquaintances. The day that Marty shot himself, Christopher ended up fleeing to Kentucky. So that in itself is suspicious and makes you think that maybe they worked together. The witness who saw Heather abducted says that Marty is who he saw, not Christopher, but police still believe that Christopher could have been involved with this crime. Christopher hasn't been charged with the crime because of a lack of evidence, and in 2007, Heather's mother officially declared her dead in order to obtain the FBI records for the case. Heather's mother ended up filing a lawsuit because the police department denied her open records request to see the information about her daughter's abduction. She had questions that were regarding the 911 call specifically. She believes that the police have played her 2 different 911 calls, saying that they must have lost the other one. On the contrary, police say that there's only one 911 call. There was an 8 years difference between her listening to the 2 911 calls, so she could be misunderstanding and heard it incorrectly, but who can really be sure? Judge Philip Shepard said that the police were wrong for withholding this information and had no justifiable reason to do so, and that they purposefully disregarded her rights. At this point, the case was over 20 years old. And that's kind of where Heather Teague's case is at right now. They don't really have a confirmed perpetrator. They don't have the person who attacked her. They don't have the people who attacked her if it was 2, and they haven't been able to find her body.
So we talked about gaslighting a little bit with the book review part, but we wanted to sort of go over it again in more of an official manner. Dictionary.com defines gaslighting as, quote, a form of emotional abuse or psychological manipulation involving distorting the truth in order to confuse or instill doubt in another person to the point where they question their sanity or reality, end quote. We really saw that with the Russell family lying to Dr. Fox, and even the officers that were just making her feel like she was insane, even though she knew that she had experienced all these things. But from an outside perspective, the cops didn't believe her, and the Russell family was obviously working against her. So that was classic gaslighting and literally made her feel like she was insane and imagined everything. This is used a lot in abusive relationships. It's a huge tactic of narcissists and abusers in general. We don't have a specific case to discuss with this because it's just so common, but we really wanted to bring it up to make sure that people are aware of what it is and kind of how it works. Then they can maybe recognize it better when they see it in real life.
Another way that the book related to true crime is through faulty or disbelieving law enforcement. I'm just going to say that the police could have 100% used luminol in the Russell home just to find out if there was blood splatter. They didn't, but they could have. But they just refused to even slightly believe what Dr. Anna Fox was saying. We talk about so many cases where the police weren't quite as attentive as they should have been. You can see examples in our Lauren McCluskey episode, Paul and Sarah Skiba and Lorenzo Shivers, even when those two boys found Tina Mott's skull by the lake and the officer just seemed so unprofessional. It happens way, way, way too often because it is so detrimental for the case that police officers take things seriously. I know that they get a lot of false alerts. I know that they get a lot of prank calls probably, but you have to take it as seriously as possible because someone's life could be at stake.
The last true crime aspect that we're going to discuss is stalkers or burglars watching people sleep, which was probably one of the scariest things I've ever researched because it just happens so much. Even just the first page of Google results, there were like 4 or 5 different cases and there were millions of hits. So I just lock your doors.
It's horrifying because you're in such a vulnerable place when you're asleep. Not me, sleep with a knife under the pillow. Gotcha.
Gotcha. Hallie mentioned the Let's Not Meet podcast earlier, and that has a lot of these kinds of stories where somebody's just in your house and not meant to be there. And a lot of the stories on Let's Not Meet don't end in like murder or some huge crime. It's just like creepy people that people encounter just in regular life, and some of them can get violent, some of them are just sort of one-off little instances, but really creepy.
Definitely my go-to podcast right now. I highly recommend it.
So there's many instances of this, like I said, and the first one that we're going to talk about is in November of 2019. A woman named Amy Andre, who was a senior at the University of Delaware, she was in bed, sleeping soundly, and suddenly something roused her from her sleep, and she looked up to see a man in her room just staring at her. She, much more calmly than I would have, said hello to the man, but he didn't respond. He just turned around and walked out of her room.
What the heck? I would have not been so calm. You would have gotten a lamp chucked at you, probably would have been tased. Like, it would have been game on.
Yeah, I think either immediate like fight mode or just frozen, like what is even happening. In another instance, in May of 2018, a man in Layton, Ohio got a strange feeling when things in his home started kind of appearing out of place, and he decided to throw up the nanny cams and see what was going on. On the footage, when he reviewed it, he saw a man enter their home and sneak into the bedroom where his wife and baby were sleeping. This man stared at the woman, exposed himself, and was self-gratifying, if you know what I mean, before leaving, all unbeknownst to the sleeping woman.
What an absolute disgusting human being. Disgusting.
And I can't imagine waking up and seeing that, but just how your stomach has to drop if you review that footage and see your wife and baby sleeping there and this man just come into your house.
I'd hide in the closet the next night with a hammer.
Don't come in Hallie's house. She'll get you. The man obviously called the police immediately and showed them the footage, and they found that the man likely used the garage code to enter the door. So that's pretty scary because a lot of people have garage codes. You never know what could happen if that falls into the wrong hands. Police even speculated that this man had come into the home previously, even before the nanny cams had been installed, because the homeowner had seen things moving around and they found evidence that he had been there multiple times. The police turned to social media and posted the footage in hopes of identifying the man, and on October 31st, Jonathan Gonzalez was arrested for the crime. In August of 2018, roommates at the University of Arkansas were preparing for bed. One of them forgot to lock the door, and the girls just went to sleep.
Never forget to lock the door.
Yeah, lock your door. Just all the time.
All your windows, all your doors, keep them locked unless you have them open at the moment. Lock them.
The apartment was monitored by a security camera as installed by the mother of one of the girls that was concerned about her safety. It showed a man entering the front door and then leaving before returning through the door again. He then entered the bedroom of one of the girls and sat on her bed. He tried to lift her blankets, which woke her up, and upon her waking, the intruder got spooked, I guess, and left the apartment. A short time later, an 18-year-old man named Michael Irvin was arrested in connection to this and another case. He told police that when he entered women's apartments, he was, quote, fighting the urges not to hurt her, end quote.
That's a pre-murderer right there. That's someone who you read about being a serial killer, and that was one of the early stages.
Yeah, he admitted to exposing himself and performing sex acts while she slept, but never actually touched the victims. But once again, just disgusting.
Disgusting.
In August of 2019, a 41-year-old woman was sleeping soundly in her ground floor apartment. Just after midnight, a man climbed through her window and stood over her. He touched her leg, which woke her up, and she screamed. He hurried back out the window and just ran off into the night. The police looked at the CCTV footage, and it showed the man hanging around the building before going inside, but he has not been caught. And the last case we're going to talk about was in 2017 in Shelton, Washington. This one has a few incidents just in one situation. The first incident happened in April. Around 4:30 a.m., a woman was jolted awake to find a man trying to take off her socks. When she confronted the man, he just calmly turned around and walked out of the apartment, which is so much more scary than them just running away for some reason. Just him turning heel and just sauntering out of the apartment. Just ugh. The second report in the area was made by a woman named Jerica Northness and her boyfriend. Jerica was pregnant and she was sleeping alongside her partner. She woke up during the night to find a man staring at her. One of them had forgotten to lock the door, and this stranger had just walked right through it to watch them sleep. About 5 other similar incidents were reported in the area, but as far as I could tell, the man has never been found and no one's been charged with it.
So lock your doors.
Yeah, if you take anything away from this episode, just lock your doors. Just go check right now. Is your door locked? Just go do it.
And that kind of wraps up our discussion on The Woman in the Window. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We'd love to hear your input or any cases that you might think that connect to the book through true crime. And for our next book, it will come out on October 2nd, 2020. So just go ahead and buy the book and get ready to read it. This book is going to be extremely important. We're going on another nonfiction route, and it's going to be Adnan's Story, The Search for Truth and Justice After Serial by Rabia Chaudhry. Go and read this book. It is so important. It's about wrongful conviction of a guy who is still in prison to this day. So please go read this book. We're going to have such a good discussion about it. If you don't read this book, you can still tune in with us. We will give you as many details as we can from the book. Since it is nonfiction, it'll be more like us talking about the case anyway. Brittany is very fond of this case.
Yeah, this story has been close to my heart for years and years, and it's just such a heartbreaking one, and I'm sure a lot of you know about it and have followed it. So we're really excited to talk about it and just do our little part to give our thoughts and spread the word a little bit more.
Just to give you a little taste of what it is, we're going to read you the synopsis. It starts, quote, "Serial only told part of the story. In early 2000, Adnan Syed was convicted and sentenced to life plus 30 years for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Heyman Lee, a high school senior in Baltimore, Maryland. Syed has maintained his innocence, and Rabia Chaudhry, a family friend, has always believed him. By 2013, after almost all appeals had been exhausted, Rabia contacted Sarah Koenig, a producer at This American Life, in hopes of finding a journalist who could shed light on Adnan's story. In 2014, Koenig's investigation turned into Serial, a Peabody Award-winning podcast with more than 500 million international listeners. But Serial did not tell the whole story. In this compelling narrative, Rabia Chaudhry presents new key evidence that she maintains dismantles the state's case, a potential new suspect, forensics indicating Hay was killed and kept somewhere for almost half a day, and documentation withheld by the state that destroys the cell phone evidence, among many other points. And she shows how fans of Serial joined a crowdsourced investigation into a case riddled with errors and strange twists. Adnan's Story also shares Adnan's life in prison and weaves in his personal reflections, including never-before-seen letters. Chaudhry, who is committed to exonerating Adnan, makes it clear that justice is yet to be achieved in this much examined case. End quote.
Don't forget to go to our website if you want to purchase that book. We'll have links for the audiobook and the paperback from Amazon. There's never enough exposure for this case.
And in case you don't know where to find the link to buy this book off of our website, it's going to be on the show notes for this episode. So at the bottom of that page, whenever we reveal the new episode, we'll have a link for the book about Adnan. This is also really cool because we got to go to CrimeCon and we were able to actually meet Rabia Chaudhry and watch her do a presentation. It was really cool to watch her. We've listened to Serial. We're reading the book now. It's very interesting and we can't wait to share this with you.
And if you want more information on this case too, Rabia has a podcast called Undisclosed, and the first season of it covered her findings on this case, and she said the book goes more into detail. So if you're going to pick one over the other, I would say the book probably, but if you just wanted to dive in that kind of way, that's available too. So be sure to do that, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.